What if you got to cancel your real estate contract? How do you get out? We're going to talk about that coming up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? Welcome to the Buy Big Island video blog. And this week, we're going to talk about not the greatest subject, but it's an important subject in the real estate world and a real estate transaction is how do you cancel if you have to get out of a real estate contract? And in Hawaii, it's different than other states. Every state is different. Their contracts are different. But in general, in Hawaii, it is a very buyer-friendly contract. So what I mean by that is the buyer is given many opportunities, many contingencies in the contract to cancel and get out of the contract for many different types of reasons. On the flip side, the seller side, it's not as simple. The sellers have to have a reason to cancel the contract. So we'll talk about that after we talk about the buyer side. So on the buyer side, just to go over some of the bigger contingencies that come up more often, the first one and most important is probably the home inspection. So the first 2 weeks of any real estate transaction is the home inspection, and the buyers have the right to cancel really based on any reason. A lot of times it is based on something that they find in a home inspection, a condition issue that is unacceptable, and they can cancel and get out of that real estate contract and get their deposit back. They can even cancel if they just change their mind or they find something else. It's really open-ended, so they can cancel for any reason in that inspection period, and that's why you want to limit how long that inspection period is, so it's not open-ended and it's not 30 days or 45 days. And then after and kind of during some of these contingencies overlap, but another big one is a seller's disclosure. If the seller submits their disclosure and you find out there's something about the property that is unacceptable, you can cancel based upon that. If there are homeowners association documents, whether it's a condo or a home in a HOA, when you review those documents, you have the opportunity to cancel based on something that you find that may be unacceptable in the CCNRs or the budget or meeting minutes, different things like that. If you find something that is unacceptable, you can cancel based on the HOA documents. You can cancel based on a survey. So if a survey is agreed upon in the contract and you conduct that survey, you find out there are violations for the county setbacks, or there are encroachments and you can't solve those issues working with the seller, you can cancel based upon that. Financing is a huge one, right? So if you are getting a loan and it's not a cash deal, and for whatever reason you are disapproved for that loan, or an appraisal is also a big problem sometimes. If the appraisal comes in low and you can't renegotiate and figure out a solution with the seller, you can cancel based upon financing. And that includes the buyer not being approved for financing, because there are cases where a buyer will do something that will change their financial situation. They could, anything from buying a car and adding a big new payment onto their monthly expenses to paying their taxes and maybe draining some of the cash that they had in a savings account. Anything like that, when you're going for final loan approval, can change your financial situation and could get you disapproved from getting a loan, and that could lead to a cancellation, and the buyer can cancel based upon that. So there's lots of different reasons in addition to the title of the property, right? So if the property, you get the title report and there's something that is unacceptable in the title report that you find out, you can cancel based upon that. So lots of different reasons that a buyer throughout the process has these contingencies in place and can pretty easily and pretty straightforward get out of that contract by electing to cancel based on one of those contingencies. On the flip side, the seller can't just change their mind. They don't have those same types of contingencies. Their right to cancel is really based on the buyer not performing one of the contractual requirements. And if the buyer misses something or doesn't provide something that they are required to provide, like conditional loan approval, then the seller can then elect to cancel the contract on the buyer. And that's a big difference, because you don't have that open-ended ability just to get out. You have to have a good reason. And so if you're on the seller side, you really want to make sure that you have a realtor that understands that and is keeping very close eye on the contractual deadlines. So if you want to cancel, you can, because you can't just change your mind if you're on the seller side. And there have been lawsuits in the past when sellers have been compelled or forced to sell their property by the courts because the buyer had met all of their contractual obligations, and the seller, for whatever reason, did not want to go through with the sale. So it's very different whether or not you're on the buy side or the sell side. You want to make sure you have a good realtor advising you on that process so you understand it. And as a buyer, always the concern is your earnest money and your deposit. And as long as you're canceling based on something that is in the contract and it's a valid contingency, that earnest money is going to be returned to you. And so you want to make sure that you're staying on top of those things. You still have to have mutual cancellation instructions signed by both parties, the buyer and the seller, and escrow will handle that. So escrow will say, both parties agree to cancel, and the earnest money will be returned, and everything will be canceled, and the money will be returned. But if there's some point of contention, then you have to work that out and negotiate that. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But if you have a very clear reason to cancel, there shouldn't be any problem in doing that. And sellers in most cases have the incentive to just cancel and move on because they want to put their property back on the market and get it sold. So a lot of times they won't hold you up in escrow trying to fight over earnest money unless they have a really valid reason, because if it's pretty clear they're not going to be able to win, there's really no point in going through that fight or any expenses that may be incurred to do that. So understand what your rights are per the contract and make sure you're getting good advice. And depending on what side you're on, it's very different. So if you have any questions, you can always email me, Dylan@buybigisland.com, or put them in the comments below or DM me and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.